In the fall of 1994, in the city of Toronto, one of the most ambitious projects of its kind was about to begin less than a mile from the center of Canada's busiest metropolis. But what seemed to be a significant step into Toronto's future was, in many ways, a symbolic return to its gloried past. For here, at 500 Commissioner Street, Shell Canada was creating a clean environment for the building of the new Toronto Hydro Service Centre. The old was about to become new again, and Shell Canada was leading the way. Shell Canada has been a fixture in the Toronto Port Industrial Area since 1930, when lakefill from harbour dredges and landfill from citywide construction projects transformed a lakeshore marsh into an industrial heartland. For the next 60 years, Shell's Toronto marketing plant played a pivotal role in Shell's distribution of products and services in Canada. Initially, Shell distributed light oils like gasolines, diesels, heating, and bunker fuels before becoming the primary lubricants, blending, and packaging facility for central Canada. In addition, it served as a large storage and transshipment center of bulk industrial chemicals. By road, water, pipeline, and rail, Shell contributed to the building of a nation by making available to the most distant and distinct regions the same resources and opportunities found in Canada's major urban centers. It was only a matter of time and technology before the Canadian demand would outgrow what this location would be able to provide. The Toronto marketing plant was destined to be closed and decommissioned.
Late in the 1980s, Shell Canada undertook a long-term strategic review of its lubricants business in Canada and in North America in general. One of the conclusions of that review was that a new world-scale, state-of-the-art blending and packaging facility was required. That plant has now been built and is operating in Brockville, Ontario. Furthermore, the existing facilities were deemed to be redundant, specifically Montreal, Winnipeg, Vancouver, and the Toronto marketing plant facilities were closed. We then embarked on the process of planning and executing the decommissioning of the Toronto marketing plant.
But leaving the original Toronto site was no simple matter. As a condition of their lease, and consistent with Shell's desire to be a responsible corporate citizen, Shell adopted a decommissioning agenda of significant proportions. To return the site to next use, consistent with acceptable industrial standards, meant not only clearing the area of any physical assets, but remediating the soils to standards of cleanliness that all stakeholders agree upon.
TEDCO is the Toronto Economic Development Corporation, an agency of the City of Toronto. In 1988, it was transferred over 400 acres of land to develop and manage on behalf of the city, lands which have been vacant and derelict primarily because of the contaminated natures of the site. In the last 24 months, TEDCO has set out to develop a master plan and framework for new growth for the future of the area. One of the major problems in establishing that growth is contaminated sites and how to remediate them. The Shell project sets a prototype for the future in doing just that. It establishes good science, but it also establishes a long-term management plan between Shell and the landowner that allows the site to be used in an active way.
At the same time as we began the planning of the decommissioning of the Toronto marketing plant, the ownership of the lands was changing. That was a further complicating issue. The City of Toronto was preparing to assume title to the properties. The goals of the project were really quite simple. Namely, we had to prepare an exit from the lands that would be both timely, responsible, and cost-effective.
By the summer of 1992, the large responsibility of shutting down the Toronto marketing plant finally began. Movable inventory and equipment was put on the auction block.
Over here is the bid, 3,000, sold number 15.
Storage tanks and their lines were cleaned out and dismantled. Soil and groundwater characterization studies were underway. Preliminary results indicated the scope, direction, and sensitivity of what was to follow.
One of the critical questions we had from the outset was how much do we have to clean up the site to make it suitable for the next use? In Ontario, unlike in a lot of places, the regulatory environment and the cleanup criteria are not regulated. So it's a matter of negotiating on a site-specific basis what the cleanup requirements are for a particular site. We ended up embarking on a multi-stakeholder endeavor which included the Ministry of Environment Energy, the landlord, the new tenant, the Waterfront Regeneration Trust, and the public to develop the criteria that we would ultimately use to decide the extent of cleanup required. Because site-specific risk assessments are still fairly rare in Ontario, it took several months of analysis and discussion amongst the stakeholders to establish levels that would make everybody comfortable with the extent of cleanup that we were planning to undertake. A consensus was finally reached on the extent of cleanup required for the site to make it suitable for the next use, and then we proceeded with our plans for the cleanup based on that agreement.
Formal demolition of the plant's physical assets began in February of 1993. Over 1,000 truckloads of materials left the site, 90% of which was successfully recycled, a laudable achievement in and of itself. Minor amounts of potentially hazardous waste materials, such as light ballast PCBs and CFCs from air conditioners, were carefully disposed of according to the regulations of the day.